Hello, hello! Welcome to Storytime with Writer's Playground. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Mariana Davila.
And I am Merrick Humbert.
And we are your hosts, back with another terrific story for you today. We will be getting into that shortly, but first, what has been going on since our last episode, Merrick?
Well, some fun stuff for sure. Since you last heard from us, we have set the dates and open registration for our 13th Playground Challenge.
Woohoo!
That's right. So that will be taking place from July 16th through July 26th. So head on over to our website and register now.
That's writersplaygroundllc.com, and registration will be open all the way up to July 16, 2 p.m. New York Eastern Time. But get that done so you don't forget. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to another great round and another group of wonderful stories to read and to share with you all.
And if you haven't participated before and have just come across this podcast, just very briefly, the way that it works is that the competition will begin on July 16th. We will send out a selection of prompts at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and from which there will be 5 options of characters. Each writer has to select one, and this character type has to be a significant character in your story. There will also be 5 options of setting, and each writer has to select one, and the majority of the story has to take place in one of those settings. And then there will be one thing, which could be anything, and that one thing has to be included in every story. It doesn't have to play a major role, but it has to be included.
That's right. And then every writer will have 10 days to write a short story up to 3,100 words. And that can be in any genre, no restrictions on subject matter. If you're not sure about something but feel it's important to a story, to the feeling you're trying to elicit from your reader, we would say go for it. You won't offend us. And provocative can be fun sometimes. And we'll let you know in our feedback if, it seems excessive or unnecessary.
Most importantly, be true to yourself and what you want to do with your art.
That's a great way to put it.
And then, after those 10 days, submissions will be due by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, July 26th. And remember that this is all on New York Eastern Time, but you can get all of the specific information about the competition on our website. And we're looking forward to our 13th challenge. Should we get into our story for today?
Definitely. But first, I did want to mention that this past week, I just watched this movie called Grave of the Fireflies, which I absolutely loved. Came out in 1988, and this might be recency bias, but I think it would be pretty high up on my list of all-time favorites. It's a devastating film. If you don't like sad movies, this is not for you. It's really heartbreaking, but it's just so beautiful. It's actually a Japanese anime film. And I'm not really an anime guy. I haven't seen much at all, so I'm not really in the place to judge. But this film is just incredible. And one of the reasons that I specifically wanted to bring it up is because it has some clear similarities with the story that we are reading today, that we're about to read right now, in terms of setting, time period, and subject matter. So I would definitely recommend. It's called Grave of the Fireflies. Really beautiful, terribly sad film. Go check it out if you're interested. I believe it's on Netflix. But yeah, let's get into our story for today.
Yes, let's do it. Today we will be reading 339 by Pauline Marie Morris, which won 4th place out of 570 entries in our 6 Playground Challenge. And the tagline is, a marriage arranged between a young Japanese girl and an older Japanese soldier bodes well until a new presence threatens to divide them forever.
It's a great piece. And Pauline Marie Morris is a talented writer from Albany, New York. She is currently seeking representation for her thriller, Water on the Grid, and she is actively working on her new novel as well, a dystopian romance set in futuristic Japan. So that's exciting. You can find her website at paulinemariemorris.com, so make sure to check that out. And you can also follow her on Instagram and Threads at Pauline Marie Morris.
And this information will be in the description wherever you're listening to this.
Yep. And I also want to mention that there is some explicit violence in the story. So here's a heads up if that's something that you're uncomfortable with.
But let's get to it. Here is 339. Enjoy!
339 by Pauline Marie Morris. Chio smiled as she ran her long, slender fingers over the Emma kimono's surface. The dried paint swirled around her hand-drawn illustrations. She could feel the subtle, uneven layers, color over color, until she granted its perfection. Songbirds chirped happily outside the open window. It was so good to see the sun again. The vivid blue of the sky was set perfectly apart from the rounded clouds, floating on the fingertips of the wind. Returning to the Emma kimono, she surveyed her work. The hand scroll was finally complete. She spent days working on the intricate details. It didn't compare to her Sobo's work, but she knew it would appeal to Isamu's love of history. The Emma kimono, the horizontal scroll she chose to depict her and Isamu's story, was beautiful. She held it with outstretched arms that were draped in the rose-colored kimono Isamu bought her and started on the right. The sun was bright on the day Chio met Auntie, her Nakoto, just moments before her very first omiai. Auntie didn't smile when Chio bowed to greet her. Instead, she placed a Japanese azalea in her hair. "May your future be bright," Auntie whispered in Chio's ear. Chio wouldn't have trusted anyone else to be her Nakoto. No one knew her the way Auntie did. She remembered twirling round and round in Auntie's garden. They would spread their arms wide, chasing butterflies or soaring like eagles. Those long summer evenings, just the two of them, warmed her heart. "What's he like?" Chio whispered back. But before Auntie could answer, Chio straightened, feeling a sharp tug on her kimono. "Oka-san." Chio turned around and bent deeply at her waist. She could feel her mother's critical eye roving over every inch of her. Her hair, her clothing, her skin. She would never be good enough. Chio straightened, pulling back her shoulders. She stared into the long line of tradition reflected in her mother's eyes. Reflection bouncing off reflection, back 100, 1,000 years. She shook it from her mind. "Come!" Auntie placed a hand on the small of her back. "They are waiting." The women moved forward in fluid motion. Their small feet, hidden under blue, white, and yellow kimonos, climbed the steps to the Grand Hotel. There weren't many visitors these days. Auntie led the way through the expansive lobby and to the table in the dining area outside, where she greeted the only 3 people on the terrace. Chio stared at her feet, or where her feet would be, under the draping blue fabric. Her racing thoughts muffled the voices of her mother and Auntie. They were bowing. She felt the kimono tighten around her waist as she bent, head low. This was it. Chio lifted her face and looked into a pair of dark, round eyes. Dark hair framed his face, along with whispers of white. Her eyebrows raised without detection. He was older than she expected. There were soft lines at the corners of his eyes and around the corners of his mouth. But that smile. She caught her breath as his grin grew. Her eyes darted to his parents. They were smiling too. Was she supposed to do something? Should she speak? "Why don't we walk in the garden?" Auntie suggested. Chio nodded, following the still smiling man down the terrace steps. Auntie and the parents fell into step a few meters behind them. Chio felt the sun on her neck as she walked the path between the lush green foliage and many colorful blossoms. "I'm Isamu." He ran a hand through his hair. She turned away, pretending to admire the garden. "I'm Chio." She looked back at him. He was definitely older. She couldn't just ask him, though. That would be insulting. But she had to know. "Do you count your age using kazui or man-nenri?" Chio could feel the fire in her eyes. Isamu held a hand to his midsection and let out a hearty laugh. "What's so funny?" Chio stopped and stared. What did she say? With a quick glance backward, Isamu leaned closer to her. She could feel his breath against her cheek. "I'm 35. His voice was soothing to her ear. "I'm sure I didn't ask." Chio held her hands together, her eyes widening in disbelief. "You must be what, 19? Isamu started walking again. 20! Chio followed. "I see. Well, even though I am 15 years your senior, I can assure you that I use the modern counting system. I'll leave the kazooie to my parents." Chio smiled despite herself. He was clever. More than that, he was clever and chose not to follow the tradition that held her mother so far back in time. Her smile vanished. Her father was like him. He wanted to learn everything, do everything, experience everything that life had to offer. "What's wrong?" Isamu's worried tone interrupted her thoughts. She paused, unsure whether she should divulge this piece of herself. "You remind me of my father." Isamu nodded and stopped, picking a flower from a tall, burgeoning bush. "Auntie told me he was killed in the war. I'm sorry." He handed the flower to her. "You know," he paused, tapping his fingertips together at his side, "we served together for a time." "You did?" Chia was stunned, but ready to grasp at any connection to her father. "Yes, just before," Isamu tapped his left leg lightly. "You were injured." Chio ran her eyes over his leg, hidden behind his jubon. "Yes, they say I'm lucky I didn't have to have it amputated. But I think I'm lucky my injury sent me home at that time. Otherwise," his face grew grim. Chio nodded and brought the blossom close to her face, breathing it in. The scent of growth and rebirth surrounded her senses, taking her, encapsulating her in a floral dream world, with Isamu standing at its pistil. Auntie was right, of course. Chia was not one to walk blindly into marriage, even though arranged marriages were still fairly common. But Chia realized that especially now, in this world of soldiers, the world that had taken her father and injured Isamu, the luxury of Renai was something that might not ever come her way. Marrying for love was a concept far removed from this world where life itself wasn't guaranteed. The spring blossoms came and went, giving way to the stifling hot days of summer. Chio struggled to breathe through the pressure of the thick air and her own anxiety. It smothered her like a scarf, covering her painted face. She tried to claw it away, instead focusing on the many bouquets of flowers placed around the altar. The Shinzen Kekkon was small, intimate. It was not at all like the elaborate Western-style weddings Chio read about. But in its own simple way, it was perfect. She could feel Isamu's eyes on her, taking in her ceremonial shiromuku. A small table in front of the altar held fruits, water, sake, and salt. Chio's mother and Isamu's parents stood nearby. The priest purified the shrine and called upon the kami. Chio's heart, full as it was, ached a little, as the image that repeatedly plagued her flashed again through her mind. Her father was in a swamp, on an island somewhere, surrounded by soldiers. A typhoon of bullets flew past him from every direction. There was no escape. Chio pulled herself back to the present, hearing the voice of the priest announcing the Sansan Kudo ceremony. 339. Isamu was smiling at her. It was that same broad grin that softened her feisty demeanor only months earlier. He looked handsome in his hakama shirt and jacket and stood tall, wearing his family crest with honor. Isamu drank from the small cup of sake and handed it to her. Chio took a small sip, curling her red lips over the rim, savoring the sweet rice wine. Chio took the second cup from the priest and brought it to her lips before handing it to Isamu. He sipped it, eyes locked onto hers. She felt the seconds tick by, surrounded by quiet, and only exhaled when the priest gave Isamu the final cup from which he drank before offering to her. The ritual was repeated 3 times. 3 cannot be divided in 2. With each sip of sake, Chio drifted farther and farther back in time. She was sitting with her father on the hillside, overlooking the city. The air was getting cold as the sun set, but her father pulled her close to him, his warm arm wrapped around her small frame. "You can see heaven and earth here, Chio." A light breeze brought out the pink of her cheeks. "It's pretty." She looked out over the expanse. "It can be. The world is what we make of it." Chio replaced the cup of sake and approached the altar, Isamu at her side. His eyes were warm as he spoke, reciting his vows. He thanked Auntie. Chio's heart thanked her too, for giving her this gift of marriage to a man like Isamu. It may not have been Renai, but over the last few months, Chio felt that early inkling of attraction and affection blossom into something deeper. Isamu was a soldier, like her father had been. He treated her with kindness and was always ready to match her wit. It didn't matter that they hadn't found each other on their own. They were together now. Chiyo's mother, Isamu's parents, Chiyo and Isamu lifted their sake and drank. Kanpai! Chiyo ran her fingertips over the Emma kimono's final illustration, depicting 3 glasses of sake. Isamu should have been home already. Her heart leapt at the thought of his broad grin when she gave him the Emma kimono. He told her to wait for him at home, but she waited far too long already. Besides, the day was beautiful and the air was quiet. He didn't need to worry. Leaping up, Chiyo wrapped the Emma kimono in a white scarf and held it tight to her chest as she ran out the door of their minka. It was small, but it would be a beautiful home for their children. Just down the hillside, Isamu was making his way to meet her, cane in hand. "Isamu!" she called, running toward the large concrete wall that surrounded their home. Isamu looked up and smiled his broad grin as he waved up at her. Chiyo took a step forward, then stopped as a familiar, heart-stopping sound resonated in her ears. It was a plane. Chiyo's wide eyes darted toward the sky, then back at Isamu. The ground shook beneath her. "Isamu," Chiyo whispered, seconds before a blinding white light surrounded her. It penetrated her senses, swallowing her whole. She was helpless to defend herself against the wall that knocked her backward. She fell to the ground, the back of her head making contact with the earth, uttering a gut-wrenching smack. Darkness surrounded her as she lost consciousness. "Isamu," Chiyo groaned, rolling on her side. One arm still clutched the scarf-wrapped package. She tried to sit up, but it felt like 1,000 needles were sticking into her skin. One particularly sharp needle sent a searing pain up her side. She felt the sticky, flowing blood before she saw it. A large, triangular piece of glass was sticking deep into the skin, fat, and muscle just above her hip. "Ah!" she screamed, pulling it from her flesh. The concrete wall was in pieces. Behind her, their minka had fallen, as if it were stepped on by a passing giant. Shattered glass littered the ground around it, and flames licked what was left of the rooftop. Chiyo's body roared with pain, but she pushed it away, thinking only of Isamu. Unsheltered, limping, waving, Isamu. She pulled herself forward, across the devastated earth. Shards of glass created new holes in her skin. She made her way to the crumbling concrete wall. Chiyo gasped. All of the pain she felt before now felt like butterfly kisses compared to the pain that began deep inside. A small ball of incomprehension that grew into disbelief, then finally into abject horror as her mind accepted what her eyes told her brain to see. Every hair stood on end, every muscle tense. She wanted to scream but could only stare, motionless and afraid. The sky looked as if it had been painted with muddy water, creating swirls of otherworldly purple and gray. Plumes of smoke rose from the city below, adding to the growing darkness. Homes and buildings lay in ruins as flames erupted as far as she could see. The air carried the devastated screams and wails of the civilians below, and far in the distance Chiyo saw an altar still standing, but surrounded by debris. Her home was gone. Chiyo pulled herself upward, leaning on a large chunk of broken concrete. She had to find Isamu. Every step brought more pain as she limped down the hill. Blood oozed down her side. She shook her head to rid herself of the light, airy feeling that was beginning to replace her ability to stand. Movement startled her about 10 meters ahead. Gasping, she fell to the ground. "Water! Water!" The chilling chorus was coming from a small group walking ahead of her. Chiyo suppressed the urge to vomit. Blood and pus spilled from their melting flesh. Skin hung down like loose clothing, and eyeballs glowed inside their sockets as the group continually called, "Water!" She watched in horror as one by one they fell into the river. There were so many. People, but not people. Bodies. Living, breathing, dying bodies. She didn't think she could be any more frightened, but then a soft melody reached her ears. They were singing. Blood spilled from her side as she squeezed the scarf-wrapped package close to her. The white silk was now a vibrant and alarming red. This couldn't be happening. There were no alarms. People left the shelters. The Americans couldn't do what they had done only 3 days prior in Hiroshima. They couldn't bomb Nagasaki. Chiyo ran forward, past the train of melting bodies, eyes roving frantically over the landscape, searching for a body that was not reminiscent of the horrors behind her, searching for just one person whose flesh wasn't burning or whose eyes didn't glow. She had to find Isamu. Where was he just before the light? She couldn't picture it. She couldn't picture anything but melting flesh, and even that was becoming fuzzy. The pain was lessening, but replacing it was an even more concerning numbness as her body began to reject this new reality. Body after body, dead, dying, no Isamu. She fell to her knees. Chiyo was fading, but could see a figure ahead of her. A man lay at the edge of the road. He didn't call to her or even move. He just lay still on his back, facing upward as if he were watching the clouds go by. "Isamu?" Chiyo called weakly.
She pulled herself over to the body and unwrapped the blood-stained scarf. She held the emakimono to her chest. The man was tall and muscular. What was left of his dark hair held whispers of white, but his face had congealed into one grotesque, unidentifiable mask. Isamu! Chiyo let out one final desperate gasp and fell onto his unmoving chest. The emakimono fell beside her. Chiyo and Isamu lay amidst a devastated city, dying along with 39,000 others that day. 25,000 more were wounded. The Hibakusha, although they survived, paid a price for their survival, experiencing much higher rates of leukemia and other cancers relating to radiation exposure, with effects being felt by generations to come. Chiyo's fingers trembled as she drew her last breath, reaching toward the flames that were beginning to singe the edges of the emakimono. Her eyes dimmed as she stared at the 3 cups she and Isamu drank from only days before. Isamu took the first cup. His parents, her parents, Isamu, and Chiyo. Sip, sip, sip. Chiyo wrapped her small hands around the second cup. 3 human flaws. Hatred, passion, ignorance. Sip, sip, sip. Isamu drank from the final cup. Freedom from the 3 human flaws. Sip, sip, sip. Chiyo and Isamu died on August 9th, 1945. The Japanese, the Americans, and the atom bomb. Sip, sip, sip.
That was 339 by Pauline Marie Maurice. And oh man, what a devastating ending.
I know. It's really heavy and impactful.
Definitely. Once you realize that the atomic bomb has just been dropped, the tone of the story completely shifts from one of hope and possibility to just complete devastation. And Pauline does such a wonderful job with the way that she describes the horror of that scene in the climax of the story.
For sure. One of my favorite things about this piece, and what I really think makes it so powerful, is the way that we get to know Chiyo and these characters as the story is beginning. Sometimes I think that people can become desensitized to horrible events like this. Real people's lives become news fodder and statistics. In a way, the humanity becomes extracted from the situation. And that's why I think that stories like this are so important. It brings back that humanity. Instead of just statistics and a news story about some people from another place and another time, we see Chiyo, we see Isamu, we see that they are people with lives, with struggles, with desires, just like anyone else. They want love, they want a home for their family, and it just sort of reminds us that we're all connected in that shared humanity. And unfortunately, in this world, that is something that is far too often forgotten, as we see people become disconnected, see people become hateful. And when people fail to see other people as people with humanity, that's exactly when wars break out, and that is what is at the core of such devastation. Obviously, there's some more nuance and complexity to specific conflicts, but in general, I think that's the case. And that's one of the reasons that I think literature and storytelling is so important, because it can help people connect and it can create empathy, and I believe it can heal in a way.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, barf.
Come on. Yeah, I thought the beginning of the story was great. I love the details that we get as we see Chiyo going through the process of this arranged marriage, how we see that she's nervous when she first meets Isamu, how they immediately seem to have a nice connection, how we learn about the loss of her father in the war, and how that was clearly difficult for her, how she obviously had a very close relationship with him.
One of my favorite parts was when we get the quick flashback of them sitting on the hill overlooking the city, and how he tells her that the world is what we make of it.
And how he tells her, "You can see heaven and earth here, Chiyo."
Oh, yeah.
It makes for a lovely moment. And I also love the tradition that we see in the story, such as the specific details we get about the ceremony that they go through. Another one of my favorite lines was, "She's staring to the long line of tradition reflected in her mother's eyes. Reflection bouncing off reflection. Back 100, 1,000 years."
Oh, yeah, that's a great line. And forgive me if I mispronounced any of the Japanese terms in the story. But it's so interesting to see how Chiyo has this sort of clash with her mother as well. how she sees her mother looking over her, how she feels like she will never be good enough in her mother's eyes. And I think that's somewhat of a universal experience, and that it is definitely easy to empathize with, feeling like there are expectations to live up to.
But then also how the world changes and how we see Chio more drawn to the modern world with more modern ideas like Renai. I think that there is an interesting balance there, something that we all go through in life, balancing tradition and progress in a world that is constantly changing as time and life move on.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And then, as readers, we just feel so happy for Chio and Isamu as we see them connecting in the story and read that their love really seems to be blossoming, even though this is arranged marriage. It seems to really be working out for him. And she seems so happy as we see her making him this emakamono. And then it's just all torn apart in the end. And that is just an intense scene, and it makes for a compelling anti-war message.
Definitely. It's great. And the explicit details as we get that final scene absolutely seem necessary to really capture and make the reader feel the horror of what happened. It is heartbreaking that this happened in the first place, and that this can happen.
And that it does happen.
Yeah, that is important to remember.
I think so too.
It is an excellent, excellent story. And for the prompts, Pauline chose a veteran for the character. Another option for this challenge was a couple with a 15 or more year age difference, so she used that as well. For the setting, she chose Japan, and the one thing that had to be included in every story for this challenge was a scroll, which was the emakimono.
Yep, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to check out Pauline's website, paulinemariemorris.com, and follow her on Instagram and Threads, at Pauline Marie Morris. We'll definitely be keeping our eyes open for those novels that she has in the works.
Oh yeah, that's exciting, and we wish her the best of luck. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Make sure to sign up for our next challenge. You still have plenty of time for that, and we will be back for our next episode in 2 weeks.
Yep, and I know I mentioned this last time, but we will definitely have a bonus episode coming for you soon. And we will explain more about that at the time. I'm very excited.
Take care, everybody.
See you guys.